Today's video is an exciting one as I will be collaborating with Charon's Bookstore, a local bookstore chain here in Trinidad and Tobago. Together we will be recommending 5 young adult novels written by local authors for younger readers. I'll be starting off with 2 fantasy novels that are by independently published authors. The first of which is The Sorcerers Conquest by Mikhail K. Khan. This is the first book in his Enixa series where we are introduced to our main character Marius, who works as the advisor for this corrupt and tyrannical sorcerer king by the name of Gudrun. So the book takes place largely from his perspective, but we also get the perspective of Gudrun himself, as well as his granddaughter who is training to become his apprentice. This was a really fast-paced and engaging story, and added to that, it's very short. So I would say it's a really good choice for younger readers who are not the most avid readers or who might be intimidated or put off by bigger books. In this new age of social media, the attention span of children and teenagers is, kind of decreasing. I've found this is especially the case with boys, so I think a book like this could be a really good way to start getting them into reading. To be frank, I would not say that this book was my cup of tea personally, but I don't think it was meant for me. I'm not the audience for this book. This book has its audience. So if it sounds like something that you or someone you know might like, I still highly recommend picking it up. The next book I'd like to talk about is The Unmarked Girl by Janelle Frontin, which is the first book in the Yara Star trilogy. This book won the Codebird Award for Caribbean Young Adult Literature in 2019, which I was actually a guest judge for. Set in a fantastical world, we follow a girl named Yara who is born and raised in a secluded community. The only other community in the world that she knows of is one that lives deep into a forest that she's told never to enter. So people in this world are also born with marks on their skin that tells you which group or which community they belong to. But Yara seems to be the only person who was born without any of these marks, so she is known as the Unmarked Girl and desperately wants answers for this. So one day she wanders into that forbidden forest, and that sets her off on a story where she ends up learning a lot of hard truths about the world that she's living in. It's the kind of book that when you sit down to start it, you're not going to want to stop until you're done. I remember being very intrigued by the world that Frontin created, but also surprised by how emotionally invested I was in these characters. I think it's a very fun and thoughtful read, so I would highly recommend that you pick it up. Moving on to some works of contemporary fiction that are actually set in Trinidad, and if there's one author that you're looking for to provide that, it is Tamika Gibson. Her debut novel was Dreams Beyond the Shore, which won the Codebird Award for Caribbean Young Adult Literature in 2016. It's a romance between 2 teenagers, Chelsea and Kieran, who are both preparing for CAPE exams and end up meeting when they are taking lessons on the side. The relationship that they develop, though, has its obstacles because they are from completely different worlds. Kieran comes from more humble means, whereas Chelsea is a bit more well-to-do, what with being the daughter of a new prime ministerial candidate. And the story takes place during elections, of course, so there's a lot of high stakes for all of these characters. Her second and most recent novel is called Off Track, which was a finalist for the Codebird Award in 2019. It's set in the same reality as her previous novel, but follows completely different characters, this time Kayla and Joelle. The story centers around their athletic interests. They're both athletes who run track, but end up getting put off track by some of the things that are plaguing their personal lives, like crime and domestic violence. What I like about Tamika Gibson is that I think she writes for our generation, the younger millennials and older Gen Zs. Now don't get me wrong, I love local literature, but the books that we grow up reading in school and stuff are often historical, and even when they're not, they're still for adults. It's kind of hard to find yourself in those stories as young people of the 21st century, so I think that Gibson offers something a little bit more relatable to the youth, and for that reason alone, I would highly suggest that you check out her work. I totally forgot to show you my copy of Dreams Beyond the Shore. I have a copy of this book, but I don't have a copy of the other one as yet. Finally, I would like to recommend one of my favorite young adult books of all time, and that is The Beast of Kukuyo by Kevin Jared Hussein. This takes place in 1990s central Trinidad in a fictional rural village called Kukuyo. We follow our main protagonist, Rune, which is actually short for Arundhati, a name that I love, whose friend and classmate Dumplin was brutally murdered and left for dead in their village. In true Trinidad fashion, nothing seems to come of the investigation, so Rune actually takes it upon herself to try and figure out what happened and solve the mystery of her murdered friend. In doing so, however, she ends up putting herself in some really dangerous circumstances to learn some of the despicable truths about Trinidadian society. The story is really dark in that it's quite reminiscent of things that we see happen often in this country, and it offers quite a lot of nuanced commentary on that. But what I really like about this story is how Hossein manages to tell it with a horror-esque edge to the writing. It's the kind of book to give you goosebumps, if you know what I mean. While reading it, you get the sense that there's something evil, like an evil force lurking in this village waiting to rear its teeth. It really throws the reader for a loop, I think, because it makes you question, okay, what is this sinister force? Is it a person? Is it something else? It's a really fascinating story, and it's definitely one that you do not want to pass up on. So those are all of the books that I have to recommend today, but I wanted to mention 2 more books that I haven't read as yet, but that I think you might also want to know about, because I feel like if you like these books that I recommended just now, you might also really take an interest in these as well. The first one is a very recently published book. It's called Where the Rhythm Takes You by Sarah Das, and this is a modern sort of spin on Jane Austen's story Persuasion, set in Tobago. So it revolves around our main protagonist, whose name I believe is Rena, and I think her parents own a small-scale family resort, and this guy who she grew up with in Tobago and ended up leaving and becoming a somewhat pseudo-famous musician comes back home and ends up staying at the resort, and it's about the budding romance between Rena and this person. And then the last book I have to talk about is called Home Home by Lisa Allen Agostini. This is a novel about this young girl from Trinidad who is sent to Canada when she is diagnosed with depression. Her mother doesn't quite know what to do with her and worries that she will not find the right treatment and therapy here, so she sends her to live with her aunt in Toronto. So the story is about her struggle with depression and anxiety, but we're also following her as she struggles to understand or decide what is home for her. Is home the place that she is in now, or is home the place that she's from? So I'm really looking forward to both of these. Again, I haven't read them, so I can't really recommend them, but if they sound interesting, I would not suggest passing them up. So there you have it. Those are young adult novels by Trinidadian authors. I would love to know if you have read any of these books, or if you have any thoughts on them, or if you have more suggestions for young adult novels. I want to read more, and I want to do other videos like these, so please let me know in the comments. All of that being said, thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you have a lovely day, and until next time, inshallah, keep reading.